Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. You know about IQ and AI, artificial intelligence. Today you're going to learn about EI, emotional intelligence, from our guest, Barbara Kerr. Barbara, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Now, Barbara, could you explain to our audience, we've heard that term, of course, we all know IQ, and we all want to be that person with the high score, but what is EI, or sometimes called EQ, right? It's interchangeable?
Yes, it is. People use either one. I could give you a simple definition that would mostly have something to do with the four aspects or five aspects of EI, and we will get to that. But I'd really like to start off with an analogy or metaphor, not to everybody's liking, but I think it's really a great image to have in your mind to understand EI, emotional intelligence. So when I first started teaching about emotional intelligence and giving workshops, people had hardly any idea about what a GPS was. Now everybody knows, because we have them on our smartphones and almost everyone has them in their car. And it's a very easy idea to keep in your mind. So how can these two be brought together? All right, so we all know that a GPS helps you identify your current position, knows where you are on the whole entire Earth, and it prompts you to identify where you want to go. So the analogous question for you in EI is, what am I feeling right now? And what outcome do I want in this situation? So this could be any problem, a personal problem, a problem at work. Let's take as an example that your business has instituted a new data management system. Not that I know much about such things, but I know that they can cause problems for everyone. So you're thinking about how you're feeling about it, what the situation is, and the outcome that you want. You want it to work smoothly. You want it to work well. You want everyone's buy-in. The GPS, on the other hand, then also assists with dealing with obstacles that come up and any changes in the environment. Well, in any time a new system is being instituted, there are plenty of obstacles. Some people want the old one. Some people can't learn the new one. There's other glitches in the technical part. So the emotional intelligence side of that is, how can I now create the outcome I desire, even though there's all these changes being made? Third, the GPS helps you recalculate new routes to your destination. You're all familiar with that. The bridge is wiped out or there's a bottleneck of traffic. It tells you a different way to go. And there's no drama and no blame from the GPS. You just do it. Doesn't matter what she or he says. It's all very calm. So on the EI side, that's how can I get back on a course that will bring satisfaction and success? And then lastly, the global positioning system helps you reach that intended destination. It might be a little different. You had to be flexible. You had to overcome obstacles, but you've reached it in an altered environment. And so overall, the EI analogous question to ask is, how can I learn to gracefully cope with an ever-changing environment? So that's my idea of EI. It helps you gracefully cope with an ever-changing environment.
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Now, why, for individuals who are listening, and myself included, why would we want to know, how is this going to help us? Is it going to help us? Or is it just a piece of knowledge like, if the tree is wobbling, don't walk under it because you might get hit by it? Why do we want to know about emotional intelligence?
In 1995, Daniel Goleman, who is still the guru of emotional intelligence, published probably the first book on this, which was Emotional Intelligence is More Important Than IQ, I think is what it was. EQ is more important than IQ. And since then, there has grown up a huge industry around EI. And a lot of it has to do with success, personal success, business success. I actually called my model that I made up for my own teaching purposes the success model. However, I've really had to rethink my meaning for success. And as I grew older, I decided that success to me meant a compassionate world. So I have tied emotional intelligence to compassion. which it naturally grows out very easily because of empathy and interacting with other human beings and knowing yourself, a compassionate world, which I think would be a better world. So that's why I want everyone to know about emotional intelligence.
Now, let me ask you, is that a better predictor? And I've read that it is, emotional intelligence, even than IQ, because most of us feel if your IQ score is, someone says, oh, I have a 122 or a 130 or a 140, as the numbers go up, unless we get to that, what we might call a crazy genius type point, we're usually pretty impressed, like that guy or that woman is pretty smart. Where does emotional intelligence fit in there?
It is so important. That is not to put down IQ. We want to work with smart people. We want to work with people who are understand what they're doing. But just recently, I read that the CEO of JP Morgan, I can't remember his name, sorry, but he said that what he thinks about in hiring someone is, would I want to work for this person, or would I want my children to work for this person? It's really not the hardest worker or the most productive people. Again, we want them to be smart and we want them to have good traits, but emotional intelligence is far and away more important in hiring people and keeping good people and having people that get along.
And that's what I'm reading a lot about in books. And, you know, sometimes they just mention it in there, but how important that is. And of course, it makes me feel great because, at least to my way of thinking, we have a score, almost like our weight, let's call it, what our IQ is. That's probably going to stay pretty much in a certain range most of our lives, I think. But the EI, emotional intelligence, or EQ, emotional quotient, we can do things with, and hopefully today you're going to teach us how. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that is the really good news. It is a malleable thing, and our brains are neuroplastic. We can change lots of things that will indeed increase our emotional intelligence.
And of course, that's what our audience loves to hear. That's why they listen to the show, because we want to find out some of these secrets of success. If we can't change the IQ, okay, we're stuck with that, but we can certainly change and learn about our EI or EQ, emotional quotient. Is there a score that goes with this? At the end of your book, am I going to take a test and find out I scored 108 or 93 or some type of numerical number?
There is a short test, actually quite close to the beginning of the book, and it's a self-assessment. So even when it's online, you know, it's you never have to let anyone else know, because I want people to be really honest. It's a 30-item assessment, and it gives you some idea of where you would fall in these 5 different aspects of my model. However, there are many tests out there. Some of you can pay $250 and up for a test, and then interpretation. You can go way up from there. Some of them are very detailed. They still usually have several big aspects to them. And there's another kind of test. Instead of just self-report, there is a test or tests that test your skills. So for instance, they might flash faces onto the screen, and you have to read the cues to understand what the emotion being expressed is. So there are a number of assessments. Since they're mostly, again, this is just something that's made up. Emotional intelligence is something that has been going on forever. It's not like the IQ test, which had, some components that measured what you knew, both in math and verbal scores. It is just something that we have made up out of our own minds, including Daniel Goleman, and there's no score to go with it. There are scores to many of those tests, but I would not go by that. It's just to get a good idea and use it for self-development, not to hire and not to fire on emotional intelligence.
Barbara, you have me very interested in this, and I think this is something we can all work on. And by the way, your book is terrific because it's set up somewhat like a workbook where you ask us a few questions throughout the book, and we can get an idea if we're fitting in or kind of going off the rails a little bit. And it's a very easy read. And in fact, I'm going to mention that in a second. But at this point in the show, I'd like our audience to know that if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Horan. Our guest today is Barbara Kerr. Her book is Emotional Intelligence for a Compassionate World. Barbara, we're going to ask you where we can get that book and if there's a website where we can learn more.
The book is available on Amazon, both in print and electronic versions. And you can also look at, take the course through the charterforcompassion.org. And it pretty much follows the book, or maybe the book follows the course. My website is barbarakerrauthor.com.
And your name is Kerr for our audience, correct?
That's right. That's right.
And as always, we will give that again later on in the show to our audience. So if you didn't get it down, grab hold of that pencil and paper, and Barbara will give you all the vital information. Barbara, who in the world, as we look at different professions, who would this really be good for? Is this good for the doctor, the waiter, the plumber, the salesperson, the politician? Who gets the most out of being, emotionally aware of themselves?
I cannot think of anyone who works with other people in any capacity who could not benefit from emotional intelligence. I would love it to be more widespread in, for example, law enforcement. I think teachers generally do have a lot of emotional intelligence, but not all. There's everyone, certainly among our politicians. We know some are not emotionally intelligent, a place where it's so very important. So I can't think of anyone that wouldn't, and I can't think of anyone that would more spectacularly benefit than any other.
So it's good for everybody. We all need it.
Absolutely.
And if it's not in a profession that we're involved in now, maybe we're in a transition profession or just kind of holding a spot for a while. Certainly, if we want to get ahead, the more we have learnings and knowledge of emotional intelligence, the more we can do with it and perhaps get people to see the world our way or buy our product or agree with our philosophy or religion. Absolutely.
And remember that there's a personal side to this too. Emotional intelligence helps you with relationships, personal relationships, family relationships, your community, and beyond. So it's not just at work. It is something that really involves your entire life.
And I would say in a world where we hear the divorce rate is somewhere around 50%, that's a good thing. And right. Even if it's just with our friends, not worrying about or feeling we're going to get divorced or doing it for that reason, friendships and relationships at work, if we can make the day better and someone else can make our day better, it's a win-win for all of us.
Right. And I think of it as it's great for relationships, personal relationships and family. It's great at work for teams, which are so important these days. And it's also good for support networks, which we need from the cradle to the grave. There's never a time when you don't need other people. Some people think that might not be true, I suppose. But the older you grow, the more you know that you do need people around you to be helpful.
How does the term self-awareness work its way into emotional intelligence?
Self-awareness is the foundational aspect of emotional intelligence. Absolutely. The other aspects, managing yourself, getting along well with others, being aware of others, and even resilience, which is a fifth part of my particular model, all depend on self-awareness. They're intertwined. Self-awareness has two major parts to it, although there's lots to say about emotional self-awareness. But one is simply being able to say how you feel, to actually come up with words that say how you feel. And secondly, to understand how others are perceiving you, what impact you're having on others. Those are the two major parts of it. And if you cannot do that, it is very difficult to do the rest. So, for example, I ask people to try to identify their emotions, and I give them a lot of different examples. You're in your office and busy working, and you get a call, and your teenage son or daughter has just been picked up for illegal substances in his or her car, or something like that. How do you feel? Now, we teach that people can feel many different ways at once. It's not just usually one thing. There's a great website to go to that I send my students to that has almost 4,000 words in the English language for feelings and emotions. You probably only use, I don't know, you could count today or this week, 10 of them.
I would say, yeah, and that might be high.
Right. But there's so much more. And it is amazing how, if you can actually identify how you feel, that is the beginning of being able to manage your emotions, not control, but manage. So you acknowledge and you manage. Yeah, this even works with little kids. I have a granddaughter who's 9 now, but when she was 2.5, and she'd start a little tantrum for something or other, we could talk to her about her feelings. Let's say we're at the playground and she doesn't want to leave. She's playing with her friends or being on the swing. And I could say to her, "You're mad. You're really mad because you want to stay on the swing and you want to stay there and play with Sally." It was an amazing thing. It was like magic. It wouldn't take away all of the crying, perhaps, but she wanted to be acknowledged. She wanted to know that we know how she felt. This is not something that only works with kids and babies. This is throughout our lives. If you can acknowledge how someone feels, you feel lonely, you feel left out, you feel like I was saying something to demean you, whatever it is. If you can talk to a person like that, it's just a wonderful thing.
And I'm just thinking, as you're saying that, if I say something to you, I root for the Mets, and you say you should root for the Yankees, and at least if you acknowledge, well, the Mets have this player and that, and they are good. Okay, now I see you're a solid person, or at least giving some credibility to my team, and I'll say, well, you have a good player there, and we have a discussion. So I guess that's, using a sports analogy, that's what this is about.
Yes, that's really good. And I'm wondering, and you don't have to answer this, but I'm just wondering if you can apply that to the political situation, which is so hot and so black and white now. Can we listen to each other and really listen and understand what each one is feeling? That is difficult.
In a way, that's going to lead up to my next question, because I was going to ask you, if you ask someone, how would you rate yourself? I remember I loved it in school when a teacher would say, okay, grade your own test and give myself an A. And then I thought, well, wait, they're trusting me enough. It's really a B or a B minus or a B plus. And I would try to give what I thought was an honest grade. It was usually more in the B plus, B or B minus. I didn't think I deserved the A for it. Are people fair about this with themselves? If you had them in a room, do they evaluate themselves pretty well within a range, or is everybody, I'm right all the time and I'll learn anything from you, or I'll be happy to sit here, but I'm still right? Well,
of course, when we give this test, and people usually take it online, at least the larger tests, and as I said, mine is totally private and self-assessed. But when you give those tests to people, you urge them to answer as honestly as possible, because it's only going to be helpful to them. I would tell them, I will never give these reports to anyone but you. It's not going to go to the people that you work for. And I think it's important to do that, because, again, it's for self-development. And you cannot use them for hiring. I don't know how honest people can be about it. And some people can't be honest with themselves anyway.
Exactly, right. Now, how about our health? What role, if any, does emotional intelligence have on the health of people?
There are many studies that show that emotional intelligence, high emotional intelligence, or at least adequate emotional intelligence, does indeed affect your health and your stress levels. And we all know that stress is very difficult on our health, and living longer, having heart problems, feeling loneliness, all of those things are part of our health. And emotional intelligence, I believe, can help you live longer.
And obviously, if we can do that, not only we live longer, we live better, and we save a lot of those medical bills that we hate paying so much. So it's right. A win-win all the way through. Barbara, once again, I'd like our audience to know, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Barbara Kerr, Kerr. Her book is Emotional Intelligence for a Compassionate World. Barbara, again, I'm going to ask you, can you tell us where we can get the book, and if there's a website where we can learn more?
The book is available on Amazon in both print and e-versions, and my website, barbarakerrauthor.com.
Easy enough to remember. And again, we will ask you for that information later on one more time. So if someone in the audience didn't get it down, do yourself a favor. We all want that IQ that's so high, or we'd like to be up there with the guys on The Big Bang Theory. But as Barbara's telling you, this is getting to be a very big item in business. And if you can do well on this and relate well to it, I'm sure it's going to enhance your career. And whether it's going to be a manager, a vice president, an entrepreneur, etc., I think it's going to be a big help to anyone in those fields. What are some of the hot buttons in this field that we should know about? You mentioned politics. We all know that. Is it two people talk about their sports teams or their parents or their nationality? What gets people excited?
I think about hot buttons, and I explain this to family members. They're probably sick of hearing it. That is your amygdala, little tiny things in your brain that acts up. And you can be caught by your amygdala. All of a sudden, you're just so angry about something or so worked up. In the workplace, you're probably very familiar, and you could probably think of hot buttons yourself. When people are being treated unfairly, or when they have unrealistic deadlines, or when they feel that they're not being listened to or not heard, when they're unappreciated, or if somebody speaks to them in a condescending way. Those have all been shown to be real hot buttons for people. And in a recent survey, they asked people, what is one thing that you'd like to improve upon? And at the top of the list, or one of the top 5, was that people wanted to be able to manage their emotions under stress. And if you can think of yourself in a stressful situation, either at home, in your community, at your workplace, that is a difficult task. And that's what emotional intelligence can do for you.
I love that, hearing that, because if we could get, it's good. What I'm hearing is that at least people are aware that if they can manage their emotions and not give someone the finger or scream at them first, you can probably talk, and most things aren't worth getting really that excited about that happen in life. Someone cut you off, half the time it's because they probably didn't even know you were there. They didn't see you in the mirror, or that maybe they weren't paying attention and should. Barbara, I see the word empathy in your book, and it pops up in a couple of sections. What is empathy, and what does that have to do with emotional intelligence?
Empathy is very important, especially for understanding other people and relating well to them. Again, for building support networks and teams and good relationships. I love the word empathy, but it actually there's at least three kinds of empathy. Let's take as an example, somebody's riding a bike and you're sort of standing there watching, and all of a sudden you see the person fall. And cognitively, oh, that person fell. That's cognitive empathy. Emotional empathy. I have fallen off a bike. Oh, that really hurts. It's very scary. It's a different level. And going to the third level is compassionate empathy. I will go over and help that person up, call the ambulance if necessary, or get them some Band-Aids or bandages, whatever is necessary. So that's kind of a simple example, but empathy comes in all those three levels of empathy can be applied to any situation. When do you actually go out and help someone? Recently, I had a mentally ill person living on my third floor down the hall. And she was opening people's boxes at night down in the mailroom. And somebody reported her. And I was on a Zoom call, and I heard a lot of ruckus outside my door. And I peeked open the door. I left my Zoom call and went outside, and I saw a policeman with his gun drawn down the hall. And I assumed that it had something to do with her. And I quickly backed up, seeing a gun drawn, and waited and heard this woman screaming. And I was empathizing with her. I knew she was having problems. I had the cognitive empathy, and I had the emotional empathy. And I am still blaming myself for not having the compassionate empathy to go out there and help her. And so, you think of these things afterwards. What could I have done? I don't know. But what if I had gone out and stood up for her a little better? So that is empathy. And it comes up every day in our lives, whether we're working with children, peers, older people. It's important in business. It's important in medicine. It's important in politics. It's important in our families.
Some professions like law, medicine, policemen, detectives, they have to, in quote, and I'm putting the word read, in quote, be able to read people. Mm-hmm. Can you explain to us what that means and how that fits into emotional intelligence?
Okay. Yes, being aware of others' feelings is another major part of emotional intelligence. And we all have some of this, but we can all build on this. One of the best ways, and I love to suggest this to people, is to watch your favorite drama on TV. Have you watched Succession at all, Bill?
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Okay. Well, as you know, everybody there is greedy and mean, but the actors are good, and the body language and the facial expressions are wonderful. Now, you can also learn positive things, but probably not from that particular show. But it will show you, one of the people on the show, Kendall Roy, the son of the rich man, the rich father, they're all rich, of course. He walks around like this with his arms out all the time. I'm sure that's not his normal stance. So stance, posture, facial expressions, people's eyes, the space they give you when they talk to you, how close they come. Some of these things, however, are culturally determined. I have to say up front that if you're talking to somebody who's Japanese or some culture that you are not familiar with, it's good to get to know that culture. Another interesting aspect of reading people is their voice. And we know that to some extent, volume, but it's also tone and the inflection. And an interesting thing that you can look for in Succession, if you're still watching it, is how do they agree with people? Do they say, I see, or I understand, or do they just go, over and over in succession? They just go, It's a gray, uncertain kind of answer. It's not reassuring.
They're kind of dysfunctional as a family, but that's the role they're playing, and they do it very well, and they get a lot of awards for it, or a lot of nominations. Barbara, you've been great in learning us to this. I want our audience to know this is a great, simple way. If you want to start moving up that success ladder, take a look at the book, Emotional Intelligence for a Compassionate World, by our guest, Barbara Kerr. That's Kerr, and Barbara's a PhD, so you can refer to her as Dr. Kerr. Barbara, would you give us the information again, where we can get the book and the website?
Sure. So it's available on Amazon, both in print and as an ebook. My website, barbarakerrauthor.com. If you're interested in enrolling in the on-demand course, occasionally I do it as a live course, but for the on-demand course, very inexpensive, through the charterforcompassion.org. And you have to go and find their institute. But, you're probably all better at it than I am. You just click through.
It's a fun read. It's a very easy read. And I think for a lot of us, it will move us up on that emotional quotient. And if we had a way to do it on IQ, we would certainly take advantage. We should do it with the EI also. Barbara, thanks for being with us today. We'd like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.